There are many heroes that walk the halls of Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, and we share their stories all the time here on Morning Rush. But then there are the unsung heroes, busy behind the scenes. Liza Lucas shares the story of two co-workers and the life-saving chain of events that all started with a chance conversation.
What are the chances that we would be in the same place at the same time, going through the exact same thing?
Susan Ellis and Tia Wimbush both work at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. Both work in IT. Their husbands both experiencing renal failure within days of each other, in desperate need of kidney transplants.
So we were just checking in with one another. She mentioned to me that she wasn't a match for her husband, for Lance. And I asked her what her blood type was and what his was, and she said that he was O negative.
The conversation sparked the life-changing idea. Tia would donate a kidney to Lance, and Susan would be donor for Rodney.
Lance's blood type is very rare to receive a kidney. It's about 7% of the world. The likeliness of Tia and Lance, or the exact same blood types, was amazing.
There are so many similarities in our stories. What are the chances that we are here and we're not meant to help each other in this moment?
And after recovery, Susan and Tia returned to the halls of Children's, where a simple check-in between co-workers turned into a second chance for two families.
To have such an unselfish gift to give you another shot at life, it's the greatest thing. It's something you can never take for granted.
Amidst a story of answered prayers, a powerful reminder.
There's a story of kindness, of checking in on each other, of connecting with people. People matter.
What are the odds, Sheba? People do matter.
Yeah, I believe that people come into your life for a reason, and this is just proof of that. Really inspiring.